Hi, this is David at Mash IT. Now, I actually wasn't going to do this review tonight. I didn't intend to buy this year's XPS 9510. We previously reviewed XPS 9500, and this being an incremental update, I said, nope, I'm not getting it in. But with how impressed I've been with these 11th gen CPUs and wanting to try this beautiful QHD plus screen, I thought, let's get one in, let's give it a review. So here it is. Now, this is the eye-watering £2,600 model in the UK, and for that price, you're getting this incredible QHD plus screen, you're getting an 11800H 8-core CPU, an RTX 3050 Ti, 32GB of RAM, and a 1TB SSD. So it is expensive, but you're getting quite a lot for your money, considering what a slim and light work laptop this is. So if you've seen reviews of the 9500, last year's model, this isn't going to look anything different, because literally this is exactly the same chassis as last year's model, only the internals have changed. So as I've said, I bought the incredible UHD Plus screen this year. Last year I had the FHD display. Now the FHD does have advantages. It's matte, so therefore you get less glare on the screen, but also being a 1200p screen, you're going to get a lot more battery life. But being a content creator myself, I love this screen. And this is the reason I wanted to try this machine out. It is incredibly bright, it's glossy, which has its advantages and disadvantages. It's got amazing colour accuracy, and the high DPI makes everything look amazing. Plus, it's a touchscreen as well. That's quite handy. And being the usual XPS, it's built like a tank. It's incredibly dense, it feels solid, and when you pick it out of the box, it almost feels like a 14-inch laptop. Due to the infinity bezel around the screen, they've really cut the size down of this 15-inch laptop, making it incredibly slim and light, easy to fit in a bag. And if you're taking a laptop everywhere with you, you'll be pleased with carrying this thing around. So we've raved on about the screen. Let's look at the rest of the laptop. We've got the usual carbon fibre deck, and it does pick up fingerprints, but I do love it. It's so comfortable to rest your palms on. It feels lovely, quite luxurious. And I do love this about the XPS line. And there's nothing that a microfiber cloth won't clean off if you do get fingerprints on there. And the same goes for the trackpad. It is an absolutely huge trackpad. Again, it picks up fingerprints, but it glides nicely. It responds well to gestures, and it's a really lovely trackpad. Now, this is one of the things I was worried about this year when buying it. There was loads of issues with the touchpads last year, with double clicks, quite a light depress, and sometimes you need to sort of press through it and double press. Loads of issues with the touchpad. Now, I know Dave 2D has had issues with this 17-inch model that he's had in, so there clearly is issues again this year. But we've had two models in so far, and both of ours have had absolutely perfect touchpads. So hopefully Dell are improving this, and these are both retail models that we've had in as well. These aren't review samples. Moving up to the keyboard, this is a fantastic keyboard to type on. The keyboard layout is great. It's got white backlights. There's a couple of stages of adjustability. The key spacing and feel and actuation just feels brilliant. This keyboard is an absolute joy to type on. And that is obviously what's really important when you're using a laptop, especially in a work environment. You need a really good screen, keyboard and touchpad. And Dell have made a really good job of this machine. Now the grills either side of the keyboard, now those are the upper speakers and they sound like this. So 50% volume. And boosting it up to 80%. It's really loud. So really quite impressive for a 15-inch laptop. And at the top of the screen we have a webcam which looks like this. So this is what the webcam and the microphones look and sound like on the Dell XPS 9510. And we've also got Windows Hello facial recognition, which is my favourite way to log into Windows. Opening up the screen and logging straight in is such a breeze. It's accurate and it logs you in 99% of the time. Just in case you don't like the Windows facial recognition, we've also got a power button which has a fingerprint reader sort of built in. But to be honest, I much prefer the facial recognition. I don't think I've ever used a fingerprint sensor in this. Okay, so looking at the ports, if we look at the right side, you can see we've got a headset jack, a full-size SD card slot, and a USB-C. And if we spin it around, on the left side we've got two Thunderbolt 4 ports and a Kensington lock. And on the front we've got a little indicator light which will show you when you're charging, powered, or your battery's low, so that's quite a little handy little feature. So with regards to the port layout, being a slim and light, I can understand them sort of going for the Thunderbolt 4 and the USB-C ports. It's nice that it's got a full-size SD card slot, but I do really miss a full-size USB 3 port. I know we're obviously trying to move away from legacy ports. I can do without an HDMI or DisplayPort because you can do those with an adapter, or a lot of monitors now have it built in. But it's so often I want to plug in a mouse or a mouse dongle, like for my sort of Logitech mouse, which works so much better via a dongle than it does on Bluetooth. But still, nobody's made a USB-C mouse receiver or even just wired mouse. So 6 years after Thunderbolt and USB-C's implementation, we still don't have modern peripherals using it. Now that's a real shame. One good thing, they'll do include a tiny little dock in the box. Now this is obviously plugged straight into one of your USB-C or Thunderbolt ports and includes a USB 3 and an HDMI port. So at least they do actually include that, and it's very compact, folds up nicely, and then it can go in your bag, although probably very easy to lose as well. Now with this model, getting to the internals is very easy. It's a case of removing 8 hex head screws and then popping the base cover off. Once you're inside, you'll notice there's 2 Gen 4 M.2 slots, which are obviously user upgradable, and there's also 2 upgradable RAM slots. Now I'm really impressed with Dell for doing this, because being a thin and light laptop, it'd be so easy for them to say, yeah, it's too difficult to give you DIMM slots, we're soldering on the RAM, but they haven't, which means you can buy 16GB of RAM and upgrade it yourself. Now bearing in mind, I have the 32GB model here. I have the low density RAM, which is the good stuff. If you buy the 16GB kits, I know they are supplying the high density for everybody that I've actually seen having that. So that's just something to bear in mind. And there's about a 10% difference in performance between the high density and the low density RAM. Okay, so we've looked all around the laptop and we've looked inside the laptop. Let's see how it performs. Now, considering how thin and light this laptop is, it's actually really impressive. The CPU on this machine is allowed to run pretty much full bore for a little while, and it gives great scores on this 11800H CPU for the size laptop that it's in. Obviously, it's not going to score as well as the big and bulky X17 Alienware that we've already reviewed with that same processor, but for something of this size, we're getting great Cinebench R20 and R23 benchmarks. And looking at this one compared to last year's 9500 6-core model, this came out 90% faster in Cinebench R20 in the multi-core score. And looking at Geekbench, the single core score is about 50% faster than the 10th gen model that this is sort of replacing. So really good improvements on the CPU fronts here. These 11th gens have really impressed me this year. I was all about Ryzen for a little while because Intel had really stagnated and we were getting Ryzen chips in, and I was really impressed. And I really wasn't expecting much from an 11th gen, but they really have hit out of the park, and it is a reason to buy Intel again. Obviously the Thunderbolt 4 ports and great single core and multi-core performance in these machines now. Also, as well as the 11th gen CPU, we've also got the RTX 3050 Ti, which is quite a nice upgrade from last year's 1650 Max-Q. Not only is it actually an RTX card, so you can use those RTX CUDA cores, which is better for your rendering work, you're also getting better performance. Both TimeSpy and Firestrike scored on average about 12.5% more than the model that this is replacing. So not earth-shattering scores, but certainly is a nice improvement over last year's model. And that also translates well to gaming. When we were gaming on this laptop, it games pretty well. Now obviously a machine this slim and light cannot run full bore on the CPU and the GPU. This chassis just can't handle it. But Dell does a really good implementation of actually throttling back the lesser needed either GPU or CPU to give it what it needs to run the games well. Usually on a GPU bound game, it will allow the full 45 plus watts of the RTX 3050 Ti, but it will throttle back the CPU to about 20 watts. But this CPU in this laptop, even at 20 watts, performs incredibly well in games. You're not going to be running much higher than 60 frames per second on this panel anyway, and this isn't a gaming laptop, but it will run most of your games at high settings at 1200p at 60 FPS or above. So really quite impressive. Now, it's just to test the sort of thermals on this system, we're going to be running Apex. I'll just show you the settings before we get into a game. This is at 1200p, so not native obviously. And then we're on pretty high settings. I've turned some of the sun shadows down to low and the anisotropic down a little bit, but other than that, we're all on high. So we're going to see how this copes. and we're going to check some temperatures and noise levels. And also, this is on the default optimized performance. There is a high performance mode as well, which gives you an extra 5 watts on the CPU. Okay, so we've been playing for a little while now. As you can see, frames per second are pretty good. We're getting over 100 frames per second at the moment. But you'll notice we're getting the full 45 watts on the GPU, which was what we expect from this 3050 Ti Max Q that we've got. But in order to keep the temperatures at a nice sort of 70 degrees, it's dropped down the CPU to 15 watts. But as you can see, it still feeds the game quite nicely. Now, if we put it on the high performance mode in the Dell Power Management, it will give us an extra 5 watts on the CPU. But ultimately, it plays nicely like this, so I'm quite happy leaving it on this one. So the fan noise, this is what's really impressive. It's about 42 to 43 decibels. Really quiet. I mean, if you're used to a gaming laptop, you'll be really impressed with this because it's really quite incredible. Also, the keyboard on the WASD keys feels nice. I'm not getting hot, sweaty palms, which is always good. Let's quickly take some temperature readings. So the WASD keys, 40 degrees. When we get to the middle of the keyboard, it's getting a bit warmer at 47. So that's warm, but you can keep your fingers there, it's not going to hurt you. And then 38 on the right side of the keyboard. If I check the hotspot at the top, again, that's still not too bad, about 44 degrees. So the temperature is really well controlled on this laptop, mostly due to the fact that it is actually throttling the CPU down a little bit to keep it in check. This is something that was a problem last year, where obviously it just let everything run wild, got to about 100 degrees, and then throttled off. So you'd get great performance for a few seconds, and then it would just dip down massively. This is much more consistent and much more enjoyable experience, especially 42 decibels. So obviously, one of the great features of this laptop is the UHD Plus screen. So I knew going into this, the battery life wouldn't be as good as a full HD model that we reviewed last year, which has absolutely incredible battery life. So if battery life is a feature that you're really interested in, and you don't mind a 1200p screen, which still looks good at 15-inch, I would recommend that one. You also get the benefits of it being matte, so better if you do take it outside. But I wanted a high DPI screen. It's sort of great for certain features. Obviously, there's no pixelation when you're looking at it even up close, so you can sort of fit more on the screen and it's a little bit clearer, especially if you're doing a lot of development work, a lot of photo editing, video editing, which is the sort of work that I do. But when it comes to the actual battery life, I was actually genuinely impressed with this model. Usually I'm getting a sort of a 4K screen, I'm expecting 3 or 4 hours of battery life, but I've got a good 7.5 to 8 hours out of this machine, streaming YouTube over Wi-Fi at about 50% brightness, which is still bright on this panel, and at about 50% speaker volume, which is quite loud as well. So really impressed with what this is capable of. Now obviously, if you're going to be like encoding a video or compiling projects, you're going to eat through the battery, especially with this 8-core CPU. But if you're taking it easy on this machine, it's going to last you nearly a day of actual battery life, especially if it's just talking office work. Another lovely feature of this machine, bearing in mind that it is all USB-C ports, is the fact it works well on a dock. Now I've plugged this into a 4K USB-C monitor with only 60 watts power delivery, and it still performs really well. It will come up with a nagging message telling you that it's not on the fastest charge, but you can still work perfectly from it. Now when it comes to the power adapter, because we are using USB-C, we've got a non-standard 130 watt USB-C power adapter. Because USB-C normally only goes up to 100 watts, but Dell have pushed it to 130 watts with this adapter so that it can fully supply what's needed for this machine. Bearing in mind you're talking a 45 watt CPU and a 45 watt GPU, and that's without the screen and the rest of the laptop. And Dell have done a really good job here. Still pretty compact, so easy to slip in a bag. So that's nice. Also, it works well still on a 60 watt or 100 watt USB-C charger that you may have lying around. So all in all, if you take this out, you can probably make do with not taking a power supply with you and just using either a monitor or someone else's power supply in the office. So that leads me on to the conclusion. Now, don't get me wrong, this is an expensive laptop, but I've been incredibly impressed, and a lot more so than I was this year. Now, a lot of that isn't Dell's doing. This 11th gen chip works really well in this laptop. I was expecting it to work well in an Alienware X17. That's got the thermal headroom to let it run out sort of maximum sort of performance. But in a thinner light chassis like this, you're still getting excellent performance. It feels incredibly snappy, and you can even do a bit of gaming on it as well, even though this isn't a gaming laptop. You're basically getting a really nice, dense, slim and light work machine that is capable of a bit of gaming, has great battery life, and enough power to do pretty much everything. The only knock I would put against it is I would like to see a slightly better port selection. But I can understand it. People want to move to Thunderbolt and USB-C, and Thunderbolt 4 is a flexible port. With a dock or a dongle, you can have pretty much everything off one port. And I do love that, don't get me wrong. Just as I work in an IT environment, the amount of times I'm handed a USB stick or a mouse, or I've got to plug something in, or a projector or something, and I've actually got to go digging around for a dongle to get the laptop working, is a bit of an annoyance to me. But I am nitpicking here. Other than that, this is an absolutely fantastic machine, and I thoroughly recommend it. Really tempted to keep this one for myself for my work, because really is a lovely machine to tote around all day. So let me know what you think of this machine. Do you think this is a worthwhile upgrade from last year? Would you consider buying one, especially knowing that there are some issues with the XPS touchpad? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you for watching.